Today's guest is Josef Bromovsky. He's the CEO and co-founder at Algoma. All right, Joe. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. I mean, based on your accent, are you originally from Europe, UK?
Yes, I am. So I grew up in the UK originally. Started my career there as a civil engineer, and actually moved over to the US to study about 4 years ago now.
Yeah. I mean, what was the push to move over here?
Um, that's a good question. I mean, I always had a desire to start a company and start a company in the construction tech space.
Mm.
Um, and it just always felt that the US was the right place to do that. I mean, I think the US just has the best startup ecosystem, and that's proven out. You've got investors who really believe in like the potential future of startups. You have a lot of investors, and I think there's a real culture in the US to believe in something that doesn't exist yet, and kind of to suspend that disbelief. And I think that is one area that Europe just lags a bit in currently.
How'd you get into construction in the first place?
So I studied civil engineering at undergrad, kind of an area that I was always interested in, the physical world, the built world. Um, uh, yeah, so started working for large multinational sort of construction and engineering firms, uh, mainly like project-based work, and then I moved to the US construction services firm AECOM, and there I was part of a technology team, and we were responsible for building new technology, new cutting edge technology, and also finding technology that existed outside the firm and pushing its use across the group. So I think that was the point that like really opened up my eyes to how much opportunity there is to use technology in our sector, and how much potential there is to potentially improve some of the things we do with it.
Yeah, and what would be the differences between construction overseas and construction in the US?
That's a good question. I would say like there's more things that are similar than different in a lot of ways. Some of the structural issues kind of exist across the globe. Housing shortages are pretty common across like most of the developed world. Definitely in London, where I was, definitely in large parts of the US. Um, you've got the same kind of overall demographic shifts, less people going into like construction workforce, labor shortages, the issues that is with pricing. So in a way, it's easier to kind of like see the similarities than the differences in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure. You said you always wanted to start a company. I mean, did that sort of, do you have people around you that are entrepreneurs, or is that something you kind of had as when you were very young? Like, what? Not everyone is so driven to start a company. What was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, certainly had some role models. My dad has done a lot of sort of entrepreneurial ventures in his time, and so I think that was always an inspiration. And um, I just think, I'm not quite sure what it was, but I think if you keep experiencing the same problems when working for a company, it gets to, and you think there's a better way of doing something or a different way to do something, but you just can't quite implement it as a sort of cog in a larger company, then I think after a while you sort of, it's a forcing function to like, well, I better go and try and do this myself.
Got it. Adapt. And when you did make the shift, um, what have you learned?
Um, I mean, a lot. I think in entrepreneurship in general, it's a bit of a roller coaster, and you never really know what's going to happen, right? Like you always want more information before making that jump. Like you never feel like, oh yeah, now is the perfect time, because it's impossible to have perfect information. I think maybe the main thing I've learned is, once you commit to something, things will start to happen that you couldn't necessarily have imagined. Like I think people that you interact with, other stakeholders. So I'm thinking like, potential customers that you're interviewing, or co-founders that you want to work with. If you're able to show like that commitment, even with imperfect information, then people kind of feel that, and it's amazing how people will want to help you on that journey. So um, I think that's probably one of the biggest things I've learned is it's never going to feel like the right time. You're never going to feel like, oh, this is the perfect time. But it's like once you do fully commit to something, an idea or a path, then a lot of things will happen.
Yeah. I mean, entrepreneurship favors the people that have a bias for action.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah. So, what is your venture, and did that always start that out that way?
Yeah, so we founded Algoma about 18 months ago. Algoma is an AI native real estate development platform. So we sell to real estate developers, and we speed up and lower the cost of their pre-construction feasibility process. And we're specifically focused on housing and the housing shortage in the US. The US needs 5 million new homes to meet current demand, and it's predominantly a supply issue. We're just not building enough houses at a price point that people can afford. So we set up Algoma to address this. We spoke to many developers, hundreds of developers before we really kickstarted this journey, and we heard kind of the same things on repeat. How frustrating it is in that pre-construction process, how hard it is to understand like what's possible on a site. Often developers will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a site trying to get information, trying to understand what's possible, only for it to not work out, not stack up. And in their minds, that is a big blocker for the amount of housing that they can actually supply each year. So we set up this platform to speed up that whole process, allow developers to instantly understand what's possible on a site, understand like what they can charge for housing, how much it's going to cost to build, and be able to take sites from that initial empty site to something that's ready to be permitted and ready to be built.
Sure. And I mean, with AI, I always wonder when sort of this information comes together quickly, where does the data come from?
Yeah, I mean, the data is the big question, right? In this new kind of AI world, where's the data? Where's it being stored? How easy is it to access? If you just think about a project going through that life cycle, you require data from lots of different sources, right? You need to understand the local zoning code and those documents. You need to understand the building code for that particular area and all of the information in there. You need to have a data source on construction costs in that area and past projects. You need comparable properties and what units are being rented for in that particular area. So it's a whole mass of data that we're trying to bring together and simplify and unify in a one place for the developer. And I think it's maybe one of the big things that the industry gets wrong at the moment is that data is super siloed and very spread out for a project. It's a result of the industry dynamics where it's like even a project, it's very fragmented. You've got an engineer, you've got an architect, you've got maybe a foundation engineer, you've got a contractor, a planning attorney, often all in just totally different firms, consultants working on a project. You've got the financial information with the developer in a model somewhere. You've got the drawings with the architect. All of these are sort of disparate, saved on individual machines, sent back and forward from email. And as we move forward in this like new AI world, having that data so spread out is going to become like a bigger problem if we're starting to want to get like efficiency and really improve that whole pre-construction process.
Got it. Yeah. And is the idea like, because obviously, like some of the data is not accessible because it's not in a form, or it's on someone's desktop, or maybe
Correct.
different businesses have different sort of revenue models where the data is in the back and it's not accessible. Is your idea kind of to bring some of the data that's accessible, maybe publicly, to sort of together? So maybe you don't have all the things that you would consider, but like let's say feasibility or proof of concept could be done. But here's the 10 things that you can look at before you spend the next 100,000.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely the problem we're going after initially. Is like, okay, how like if you want to evaluate like 40 sites this month, like how do you quickly evaluate which one's going to work? What's going to stop you, as you say, like spending $100,000 on service fees to then actually work out, okay, this project's not going to work. It's never going to get it where we need to. So yeah, the first point is the feasibility, and allowing developers to really quickly understand whether a site's going to stack up, whether it can be underwritten in a pretty short period of time.
Yeah, and you said you talked to hundreds of developers. Like for you, I always wonder, because to me this is a very specific, targeting. Like, what do you think your drawing base for your service or sort of, offering that you're putting together?
Yeah, so I mean, we're focused on mid-sized developers, which we class as sort of 20 people and below. And the reason we're going after this segment is one that um, there's a very long tail of developers, like everything in our industry, like it's very fragmented, and actually, like the vast majority of housing in the US gets built by these like mid-sized developers who are like focused on a small regional area. And, unlike some of the big players who might like have central teams that can do a lot of the work manually, they might have like costing teams and, these big central teams, like these smaller developers really don't have access to that kind of information. And so they're often just relying on, phone calls and paying for services and doing things in a way that is perhaps not as efficient as it could be. So that's why we're really starting with this group of developers, residential mid-sized developers. But in the future, we would definitely move up to some of these larger enterprise developers as well.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, uh, I was just told before I came on here that you guys raised some money. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if what are because um, what are some tips for people that have an idea, they've worked on it, it's starting to show some validity, but they're gonna have to raise money. I mean, you've just gone through the process. What have you learned going through the process?
Yeah, I mean, fundraising mirrors entrepreneurship in a lot of ways, and that it normally can be like quite a journey. I think one thing, so we did a seed round just before in November, where we raised $2.3 million, and it was led by this firm called Zakua Ventures, who are based in New York, where we are, and uh, what we're very lucky is we're supported by these firms who are construction specific, right? So they really understand like what are the problems in the built world, and that makes kind of when you come with your solution to a problem, you're not explaining two things. You're not explaining the industry and the current problems, and then have to explain the solution to those current problems. And you almost have to convince people of two things: the current state and the solution. If you find people and investors that really do understand your industry, in a way you're halfway there, because they will at least understand what is the current state of play. And I think that would really be my a key bit of advice. Like, find people who know your industry, whether that's like angels, or angels definitely at the beginning, I think are a massive help. But investment firms, as you grow, that understand your industry and focus on them. I think, especially in the more specialized sectors like construction, I think you'll have more success doing that.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure. And I saw in your profile that you went to Harvard, I guess, for business.
yes, yeah. So that was originally like how I came over to the US. it was kind of part of the goal of starting a company. Obviously, didn't have a network at all in the US, or really know anything about the about industry or construction in the US apart from a few work trips. So I felt like doing an MBA was the best way. Combine some of that construction engineering experience with some learning about like how to start a company and how to fundraise, and the great thing about doing something like an MBA is it gives you time to think and time to plan, right? You're obviously doing the study, but you can also think about what's next, put together a business plan, and start having those conversations with like potential customers or potential investors to really like use that time to like hone the idea and hone where you're going.
Yeah. It sounds like you had a vision, you went through it, and it served you well. Would that be a correct assessment of your time at Harvard?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes it sound too smooth and too premeditated. I think like the reality, it feels like was a lot more bumpy than that, but something like that. I think I had the general principles of what I wanted to do, but the specifics and the reality is was a lot more bumpy.
Give me some of the bumps. Like, what are we talking about here? What something? It's heading in the right direction, but what were some of the bumps that you learned from?
I think um so like I think fundraising is just like a very bumpy road. Like you have to be targeted in who you go to and who you want, but it's also you have to talk to a lot of people. You eventually you're going to find someone where your problem resonates and you resonate, but you have to like talk to a lot of people, and even like a successful fundraise, right? You're going to speak to 150 people, and 98% of them are going to say no, and 2% are going to say yes, and that's like a successful fundraise. So like you just have to, in a way, have quite thick skin for one, and also you just have to have quite a lot of grit to just keep going. I would say you just got to keep going, because it could be those 3 or 4 people are going to say yes are going to be the last 3 or 4 people you talk to. You really don't know. There's no way of telling. So I think that's a bumpy road. And then I would say like just specific to development, real estate development, construction engineering. I think we all know how many kind of like unknowns there are in that world, from delays that are outside of your control, projects getting cancelled, projects restarting. We live in a cyclical industry, the construction and engineering, and we've all things are going on in the macro environment. Construction materials are going up, tariffs, all of these things that everybody just has to keep on top of, and you just have to be like very aware of what's going on and be adaptable to change, I would say.
Sure. Adaptable change. That's great advice. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with what you are doing, more specifically with your technology, or anything else that I didn't ask about that you want to share?
Yeah, I think if any of your listeners are interested about hearing more about us, they can go to our website, which is algoma.co, .co at the end. Currently, we've launched our platform with a select group of developers, but we're going to be opening up to the wider market in the next quarter. So if people want to join the waitlist and get early access to the platform, and learn more about what we're doing, that's the place to go. www.algoma.co.